That's why we have Michelle Suskauer here with us. Counselor,
Yes.
it is good to have you here.
I'm happy to be back.
And we have this international topic.
Right.
The whole notion of bringing someone who has presumably taken up arms against the United States in a combat theater or a terrorist operation and treating them as a criminal defendant in an American courtroom. What's your take on that?
Well, you know, there's so much that is back and forth as to whether or not someone should be brought to Guantanamo or whether somebody should be brought to the criminal justice system in terms of whether they're going to be held as a regular criminal defendant or whether they're going to be held as a military combatant, has a whole lot of issues in terms of the rights this individual has in the justice system and what the justice system is. So it's my understanding that no one has really been added to Guantanamo. I'm not sure whether this is going to be closed at the end of Obama's administration, but this is purely an administrative decision. The buck stops with the president as to who is going to be held as a military combatant or who's going to be tried in a regular federal court or a state court. And in this particular case, I don't know if I guess the decision has been made. There's questions as to how much information can be gotten from him in terms of an interrogation before he's read Miranda, before he's afforded an attorney. And that really is, I think, the most important thing right now that people are focused in on, how much intelligence can be gathered from him.
Now, earlier today, we had General Michael Hayden here on the program, a guy who used to run the NSA and the CIA, a guy who's been the point man on some of these rendition operations. He called this a rendition operation, and he called what's happening with Katala being on a U.S. Navy vessel a gray site, different than a black site where they used to take these guys and interrogate them without being under the umbrella of the U.S. judicial system here. What do you think, as a criminal defense attorney, about getting questions and answers from a guy who's been detained, but maybe not necessarily read his Miranda rights, not necessarily on American soil?
Well, that's, I mean, again, putting on my criminal defense
lawyer
hat.
Not your Michelle Suskauer hat.
Right. I mean, certainly, if just looking in sort of in the broad sweep of this, certainly as a criminal defense lawyer, I want to make sure that as an attorney, I'm there and I'm protecting my client. But again, it depends on, you know, I think that they want to have it both ways. They want him to go into the regular criminal justice system, and yet not yet. They want to be able to get as much information out of him before he has to be afforded the rights.
Why can't we have it both ways? We heard General Hayden also say that there was a 60-day period that they established on when they could gather intelligence before, I guess, the next step took progress. Why can't we have it both ways? It seems like we need that now.
Well, it really is being had both ways, because if there's this 60-day window, then they are able to play with it in terms of getting as much information before they go ahead and afford him the rights. Because as a military combatant, certainly, you know, you don't have the rights of habeas corpus, you don't have the rights of Miranda, you could be held indefinitely, and here, this is not what we're going to do with him, and yet we're doing intelligence gathering because of sort of this gray status of how he's being held. So it really is both ways right now.
And it would seem to me, and just one friendly amendment to what General Hayden was saying, the 60-day period is renewable. So
Right.
those 60 days could become 120 days and so forth. But this is what I come back to, hearing you as a defense attorney. If you had a client like this, and you're showing up in the C. Everett Perryman Federal Courthouse in the heart of Washington, D.C., seems to me your first line of defense is going to be disputing this entire process of what General Hayden called rendition.
Right. And whether or not I have the grounds to actually dispute it based on this gray area. And of course, you know, are they even getting any information out of him? Is he even being cooperative? So we don't know. This may be just sort of an exercise in futility if he's not even speaking at all. And what are the methods that are being used in order to get information out of him? Again, he's on a vessel, we don't know, but he's still not in a regular jail. He's still not, we don't know what eyes are on him as to what exactly is happening and how the methods are being used to get this information out of him, if they're even getting any information at all.
Well, the other thing, it would seem to me, and this really moves away from legal strategy to security. You're bringing in someone whom you believe to be a terror mastermind into a courthouse in the heart of the nation's capital, right off Pennsylvania Avenue, or in close proximity between the U.S. Capitol and the White House. And security logistics for this, I believe, are just going to be a nightmare if, in fact, he ends up standing trial in federal court.
But haven't we seen this before? I mean, because we have seen individuals who were tried in our federal courts before. But also remember another thing, this individual was not taken off a battlefield. And that may be another reason why the administration is looking at this in a particular way. And that seems sort of the way the administration has been, when we've been capturing individuals, we have been treating them. We have been bringing them into our own court system. So I'm not surprised at the decision, but I'm interested to see, again, how the security is going to work as well. I think that's an important point.
Well, let's move to another story that we have spoken about before, and that is the whole notion of capital punishment, prisoner executions. 3 states have resumed them. Last night in Georgia, Marcus Wellens, the first prisoner in 2 months to be executed down in Georgia. This morning in Missouri, John Winfield also executed. And completing this trio of executions, there is one scheduled tonight in Florida. Now, the 2 inmates who went ahead and underwent the punishment, pronounced the sentence, they were injected with an intravenous dose of pentobarbital. The executions went as planned, but secrecy surrounding the drugs and the process remains part and parcel of this issue.
Right.
Your take on the renewal of capital punishment?
Well, I mean, again, as a criminal defense lawyer, I think that there are still a lot of questions as to, and there are going to be significant suits that will continue regarding the secrecy of who's administering and in what doses, because of the lack of the one particular medication that has not been available anymore that has gone into this cocktail. But it's my understanding that it's only one medication that's given in Georgia, and that's what has been given. So I'm not surprised. Again, it's coming in such a rush. 3 within 24 hours, it's significant. I don't think every state who administers a death penalty is going to necessarily jump on that bandwagon, because I think there are things that are going to be litigated regarding the medications that are used because of the botched execution in Oklahoma.
And really, I don't know, maybe you agree with me or not, Michelle, but this boils down to one question. Does somebody condemned to die have a right to know, a constitutional right to know what they're being injected with?
Well, I mean, at this point, the stays were not lifted by the U.S. Supreme Court and the state Supreme Courts regarding that issue, but that doesn't mean that's going to not be resolved. Again,
do you think that's the only resolution for this issue now, with the death penalty going to the Supreme Court to weigh in on this?
You know what? I'm not sure. I think it's a significant issue, though. And again, I still believe that there are some states that may cease using the death penalty as a result of what happened, based on 8th Amendment cruel and unusual punishment. So I think, from a criminal defense lawyer point of view, certainly if you're going to have the death penalty that's going to be utilized, certainly I personally think that you would have a right to know what medications are being used and in what doses, and if they were tested, because these shouldn't be test cases here. We're not in a laboratory. These are individuals. They're being sentenced to die, but they're people.
And you would argue that under the 8th Amendment of the Constitution?
Sure.
Okay, interesting.
Well, there's something else going on legally, and it's not only the rights of the accused to know what toxic cocktail they might be given for the execution, it's the public's right to know. Several media outlets, including the AP, filed a lawsuit to get Missouri to release information about where the state is obtaining its drugs. Do you expect Missouri to comply, or do you believe the Attorney General of that state will end up in court fighting a lawsuit from the media outlets there in the Show Me State?
I think they're going to be fighting a lawsuit, because again, if they're going to comply and they're going to release this information to the media, certainly why wouldn't they be releasing the information to the inmates attorneys themselves? So I think we're going to see a battle on that front. I do.
And of course, we don't want to forget about the victims in here too, who have to suffer. They thought they had some sort of closure, at least some sort of closure on the horizon, with the person who's been convicted in a court of law by a jury of their peers, or a judge if that's the case, to die. And so there were these stays of execution. Now that can continue, and I'm sure there's been some issue there. Of course, we don't want to talk about this issue without talking about the victims' families in these cases as well.
absolutely. But again, you know, when someone is scheduled to die, and they're certainly, I mean, this is not something new where there aren't last-minute stays. I mean, there are last-minute stays because of appellate issues on so many, a variety of fronts. This is a significant issue. This is not an issue that was created out of thin air. It was because of what happened in Oklahoma and other states.
And it's why we bring you back time and again, and we're glad to have you, Michelle Suskauer.
Thank you.
Suskauer for the Defense. It almost sounds like a television show. The name of this program is America's Forum, but we're happy to have you weigh in with your evaluation of capital punishment. Should it continue? Should it be ended? The different permutations thereof. Why don't you tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. There's also email, good old email that you can use. Our address is connect@newsmaxtv.com. And let's not forget Facebook. You reach us on Facebook at facebook.com/Newsmax. Coming back. That's what we'll do after this.